Hello everyone, welcome to the weekly update for the 23rd of October. I hope you're all doing well. I thought we'd start with Cross the Pond and I would just talk a little bit about how it went briefly. So as you all know, Saturday was Cross the Pond. It's the biggest VATSIM event of the year, or at least there's two of them in a year, so it's one of two, where hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands, and probably is into the thousands of pilots take to the skies to cross the pond from, in this case, it was the US over to Europe, or North America anyway. And you engage in getting a slot. You follow the processes of the slot lottery, and then there's full ATC, including Oceanic, the whole way. I did Seattle to Amsterdam with a couple of the BVI virtual people and friends of mine, and a couple of other BVI members took part as well. And so I think pretty much as a whole we all made it down. I've always said, when people say, oh, I'm getting a bit tired of flight sim, I'm getting a bit tired of the PMDG, or I want something new, I totally get it. I really do. But doing events like this is one of the best things you can do. Even if it's not a big event like this, just go on the VATSIM and look at the events page, because you will learn different procedures. You will, how many times can you say you've flown Oceanic with full control? I mean, that's a whole thing in itself. So there's so much more to flight simming, and VATSIM really provides a rich amount of detail and really allows you to enhance your knowledge. So it's pretty cool. I mean, they don't do the full position reports anymore via voice because it just gets too crowded. It was very cool when they did that, and you can still request it on days when it's not so crowded, but that used to be pretty cool. But now they do everything via radar, but you still have to request your oceanic clearances and things like that. And even the radio comms and the sound and everything changes to HF, high frequency, when you're over the ocean. So it's very cool. I've got to say, Seattle and Amsterdam were both stellar airports, so really good ATC. I know Oceanic had some controller changes and things going on, and it made that a bit hectic and perhaps not the best it could be, but certainly the airports couldn't have asked for any more. Amsterdam control is always very efficient and works very well, and Seattle did a very good job getting us out. No problems in repositioning. We pretty much all got out on our slot time, so that's great. So the next part of this, I'm just going to talk a bit about TFM, and I'm also going to talk a bit about Microsoft. So just to let people know, I know there has been a problem that has been reported this past week with Microsoft Flight Simulator, where keyboard, the keyboard and cursor problem, which is also affecting sighted users. So if you're having difficulties with the keyboard still in the beta, that's why I would imagine if it's a problem for sighted users, as has been reported, then that's probably a good thing, because it means that it's something that they're going to have to fix. If it was just an accessibility problem within itself, I'd be more worried, but looks like it's actually a slightly bigger problem. I'm not going to make any comment. It's a beta. I mean, you're probably going to have problems. We all know that Asobo have come a cropper sometimes of some very interesting problems that perhaps not sure how they took place. The weather things and things that have happened in the past where you think, I'm not sure how that ever got through. I'm just going to put it out there now. I don't care about talking Asobo up or talking Microsoft up. I'm always going to just talk the truth on here and talk about what I actually think about a simulator. I don't care who watches. I don't care. I very much doubt that they're watching, but I don't care if they watch, if they see and think, oh, this guy, we better not. We don't want to. Do anything particular with him because he's been talking trash about it. I just say it how it is. So when something's good, I say it's good. When it's bad, I say it's bad. Generally, it's somewhere in the middle, and I think that's where Microsoft is now. It's somewhere in the middle, and it's on a road that is progressing. So I'm always going to just say how it is, and people like it or they don't. Too bad. But it's certainly coming along, and like I say, it's a beta, so these things, they're going to happen, and I'm sure it looks like it's probably something that's going to be resolved without too much of an issue. In terms of TFM, there's a couple of things to discuss from the latest blog post. Of course, you can go onto the website and look at the blog. As always, the thing I wanted to talk about for me that stood out on this post was the repositioning to runways that's now going to be included in TFM, along with repositioning to gates. So this is going to be native support. Obviously, you load it into the sim. You can press Control plus G, of course, preceded by right bracket, to bring up gates, where you type the ICAO code of your airport and then just hit enter on a gate to jump to it. Similar situation with runways, right bracket, Control R. This is a really good feature because it means that we don't have to rely on other softwares to reposition. Sometimes I usually have Tramp open to reposition. It doesn't mean that Tramp can't be useful for viewing procedures and things sometimes, but it's kind of annoying to have it open. The reason I have often used Tramp rather than GSX is because, especially with add-on sceneries, sometimes GSX does not line you up properly with the runways. But now it's going to be in TFM, which I'm assuming is going to work in P3D and Microsoft. Obviously, you'll need to use make runways, and there is a note here talking about Microsoft that could take a little bit longer, both to run make runways and also for TFM to read that data with Microsoft, purely because there's probably more runways in Microsoft, depending on what scenery and things you've got in P3D as well. But so that could take a little bit longer, but I think that's a really good feature for VATSIM. I would also love it if they could include the hold short point on these runways. I think that'd be really useful. I know Ideal Flight can do that, so if TFM could ever pull that data as to where the hold short point is, that would be really useful. So you could actually hold short of the runway. Or even just as well as the, in the runways dialog, maybe just show you all the taxiways and things that are listed. It does sometimes happen on VATSIM that the controllers will say, when you say, okay, I need to go to the runway, they may say, okay, can you reposition to, holding point Juliet 1 or Alpha 1 or whatever. And that is obviously something we can't do. So that's something for the future, but it all depends on what TFM can pull from the scenery. That may be easier in Microsoft Flight Simulator than in P3D, and it's certainly probably going to be easier and better if you're running an add-on scenery that actually has all the taxiways in compared to a default scenery which may have unlabeled taxiways going on. Okay, so now I wanted to talk a bit about the Microsoft Flight Simulator section here on the blog, which talks about the developers' findings with Microsoft Flight Simulator. I'm not entirely sure what's happened here, whether TFM has just imported the memory block or whether the FSUI PC developer has gotten to it over the past week. It doesn't actually say, I don't believe, unless I'm missing something here. I'm guessing maybe TFM imported it, but either way, TFM has, by the looks of it, made some progress with the PMDG 737. So the section here, FS 2020 and the PMDG 737-700. I just wanted to point out as well that this should work with the 800 and 600. They're also out for Microsoft. So if you are looking maybe to get into this on Microsoft and you want to get a PMDG plane, maybe you've used it in P3D and you want to just test this out, the 600 is a lot cheaper from PMDG. I believe it's like $35 compared to the 700 and 800 because they're much more popular. So if you're looking for a cheap aircraft PMDG and you're kind of thinking, okay, I don't know if this is going to be ready yet for a little while and I don't really want to shell out for all the aircraft or something, the 600 flies just like a regular 737. It's obviously the smaller version, but it's a lot cheaper. So just to put that in there, and I'm guessing, obviously I haven't tried it myself, it should work the same way with First Officer Next and TFM. I don't see why the offsets and things would be different just because it's a 600. But again, just to put that little caveat on, I haven't tested this myself. I also know that a lot of people, before I get into this, a couple, I had an email the other day and it went to the BVI podcast email, just saying about, oh, there hasn't been a podcast in a while. Yeah, we're planning to do one with Andy to discuss TFM going forward with Microsoft Flight Simulator and just in general the progress plan, because of course after a couple of weeks when the 7.3's done it, the aim is to go on to the 7.4 and then eventually the triple. But we wanted to give it a bit of time as well for this situation with Microsoft and the PMDG to settle down. If we'd have done one last week, we would have been telling you a lot different information to what we'll be telling you this week, and maybe that'll be the case next week. So we're just going to leave it for a week or so, just sort of let the developers of TFM get a bit more of a handle on the 737, what works, what doesn't, and before we start giving you all this information that becomes out of date. So there you go. That's what's happening with that. There will be a podcast when everything sort of settles down and we have a bit more credible information to give you that we know is going to be more sort of long term. So the developer says he was able to take a test flight in the PMDG 737-700. It was him, the plane, and first officer next. Okay. Aside from a few bloopers at the beginning of climb, everything went without a problem, so now we can use FS 2020 with the PMDG 737 series. The bumps to work out are below. So in terms of people saying, okay, can I buy this and do a full flight with it? Well, yeah, I guess so. It looks like it. You may have some issues. Things are not as they are necessarily in P2D. I wouldn't, say buy this and go on VATSIM and, just off you go. Looks like there's going to be some things that need to be ironed out, but that was to be expected. So let's have a look through these observations, because there's a couple of things here. So LNAV, VNAV, flight level change, altitude hold, and speed brake work differently, even though the offsets have the same names between P3D and Microsoft Flight Simulator. Everything above except the speed brake reports off no matter the spate. The speed brake offers a random floating number, like 5.33 instead of blah, blah. So essentially the speed brake reports the incorrect figure and the rest of them report off even when they're not off, so be aware. If you use make runways, give TFM time to load, blah, blah, blah. So we know about that, like I said. Getting first officer next to recognize the door is open can be a challenge. Obviously, yeah, you need it to do the automatic flows. There are, at least in the P3D version, buttons for some of the flows. Someone needs to contact the developer first officer and ask how we get into the briefing section. And also here, make sure the flight directors and auto throttle are turned on. FSO next doesn't do them for some reason. I can't confirm that. I would imagine it should do them, so that might be a bug. You got to remember that this is a Sim Update 11 beta, so things can get moved around that maybe first officer hasn't updated yet. But I would imagine it should do those. FSO Next will not update the FMC route pages. It does fuel, payload, and performance. Now, this is actually a feature that you can turn on in First Officer Next. It should do the route. You just have to turn it on. So you got to go into the options and do that. It will not do the SIDS and stars from your SimBrief plan that it can pull. It will not do the SIDS and stars. You have to do that. So I'm assuming from this, it doesn't actually say, but I'm assuming that we can now use the FMC with TFM, or I'm not sure if Andy here, the developer, is just using First Officer to have it program certain things. But I'm assuming, since it says he did the route himself pretty much, that he maybe used the CDU. Not entirely sure, but either way, First Officer can do the route. You just need to do the SIDS and stars through TFM's CDU. Aside from this, the flight was fun and quite amusing. Right, so let's have a look at this. There's some more points that he's put here. The airplane was not loud even during the takeoff. The engines were quiet. Okay. The fuel burn is much better, averaging of 4,800 pounds per hour at flight level 370. Gotta say the P3D one is fine for me. It pretty much matches SimBrief, so never had an issue with fuel burn, but there you go. That's my personal opinion. The airplane is much more responsive than the one in P3D. I'm not sure whether that means the CDU or just switches or what, but I guess that's a good thing. I mean, yeah, I've never had an issue with responsiveness really in P2D. Maybe he means the simulator with the airplane, I'm not sure. Probably depends on your PC for that as well, but yeah, I mean, more responsiveness, that's always a good thing, right? I guess. If you have GSX and PACX installed, First Officer Next will use them in flight. And I have GSX and it loaded passengers while we set up the FMC. Yeah, GSX is a lot more integrated now. Can even be integrated with SimBrief. The point here that I think I've said before, you do have to purchase first officer next for each individual aircraft, so you'll need to actually purchase it for PMDG 737, and that will mean you have it for the 737 series, but not for any other aircraft, which isn't such a big deal since we don't really have any other aircraft that we can use properly at the moment in Microsoft. But when we do, if we do, then that will be the case. Like I said, my personal recommendation, maybe the 600 will be a good one, but there you go. Just because it's cheaper. So it says here that the FSFO next for the PMDG is $30. ATC behaves itself when you control the aircraft. I guess that's default ATC. So that's always a plus, I guess. All gauges such as speed and altitude read correctly when you're in control of the aircraft. I'm not sure what that means when you're in control. I don't know if he means when you're manually flying. I don't know if he means when, if you start having issues when you put the automation in, but yeah, I guess they read correctly. That's good. The aircraft behaves itself when you have control of it. I'm not really sure what that means either. I mean, I would hope so. If the aircraft starts going wacky when you have control of it, then yeah, we have a problem. So I don't really know what that means, but I mean, again, I guess positive. Then there is some FS 2020 bug updates, which just mentions here that support for FS 2020 will have the most bugs. So please include the simulator version, which can be found in the title bar, to the exact simulator version 1.2.9, etc., and all the digits in the simulator version. Same goes for P3D. Again, put P3D v5.3 if you're on a hot fix or whatever. Make sure you include that, but especially for Microsoft. There's talk here that they hope to have some of the Microsoft bugs worked out by next week. So it sounds like it's a pretty short timeline on that, which is good. And the synchronicity and the support for the PMDG within P3D and Microsoft is also discussed. Again, I touched on that last week, that the idea is that because there's similarity in the SDK, it shouldn't take too long for anything that's done in P3D to be in Microsoft or vice versa. It's not going to be a case that they have to do one and then redo it for the whole other simulator, which is very good because it just means there's more options. It means that existing support doesn't fall by the wayside, and that's really good news, I think. Yeah, so it says here the offsets are pretty much identical except for a few that are different, and the entire memory block. So yeah, it says they can build support for the P3D version of the 737, and the support will follow you over to Microsoft except a few bumps in the road. So as we've seen here, it's not identical. There are things with what it was LNAV, VNAV, altitude hold, things like that, speed brakes, but nothing major that needs a whole overhaul. It says we don't suspect more than a week or two of lag on the Microsoft Flight Simulator side. We feel it's safe to start purchasing the PMDG 737 series for Microsoft Flight Simulator. Have fun, and if you get stuck, we're always happy to help. So obviously you can email them as well, or submit a ticket with all the relevant details. You've got to remember, like I said, that this is Sim Update 11 beta, so there's a lot of moving parts to this. First officer has to keep updated for the beta. Things can change in the beta. The PMDG and TFM, so everything's working in a sort of beta environment where things are rapidly changing. So sometimes an issue might not be a TFM problem. It might be that you're on a beta and it's just a bit unstable. But yeah, I see no reason why if you're using P2D or you want to try out the PMDG, you could buy it in Microsoft, buy First Officer Next, and try it out with TFM. You are probably going to encounter some bugs, and like I said, I wouldn't expect that everything's going to go flawlessly. So I would approach it with the mindset of this is something I'm sort of testing out, rather than, okay, I'm now moving away from P3D. I'm going to get this plane and then I'm going to fly on BATSIM and I'm never going to use P3D. That's just a really silly mindset, in my opinion. It's just sort of a Microsoft Flight Simulator tribalism. But if you approach it in the idea that, okay, I'm going to test this out and see how many flights I can do, and it's cool that I'm flying in Microsoft, then yeah, I would go ahead and purchase it. Why the hell not? I mean, we got to get in there at some point, and I think over the past few weeks we've made real steps forward in getting this great aircraft in Microsoft. As I said the other day, across the pond always serves to show me how important it is to have a good aircraft that's often payware that works really well. In Cross the Pond, we did have to insert a new waypoint on the arrival that wasn't in our arrival. I know a couple of BVI people had to do holding. So this just shows you how important the quality airliners are that you can rely on, you can trust that they're going to do what you tell them to do, and you're not having to worry about faffing around with Tramp, which could do all these things, but with a little bit more faff and difficulty and stress, and probably less reliably as well, especially with holding. And certainly some of the freeware aircraft in Microsoft as well, and the mods and things, the PMDG just knocks them all out of the park, really. So yeah, I think it's great, and looking forward to seeing what happens in the future. All right, well, we will see you in the next weekly update video, and stay tuned for more on the social media, and you can always drop me an email, blindflightsimmer44@gmail.com, like usual.